Hi everyone. So today we are going over the life skill of adaptability. And so adaptability is the ability to move smoothly from situation to situation, adjusting, our language and our behavior to conform to differing norms. And so, adaptable children are able to cope with the inevitable changes that occur in life, such as, moving, new siblings, new schools, or a new classroom, or even as little as, getting a sub for one day, right? So being able to adapt to that. And so routines will be different in different settings, right? And so adaptability is the skill that helps identify, when children are able to learn the routines and adjust to each setting. I think like the best quote to go with adaptability is like the only certainty in life is uncertainty, right? So it's an important life skill to learn, but also there are some pieces of adaptability that are more innate as opposed, and then built upon, just like some other life skills. And so this lecture, it's pretty short, but there are two videos that I wanted to show and then talk about too. So there's that as well. So there's something called social mismatch, which is where, children who do struggle to follow a routine that is different than theirs at home. So you know, this might look like children who are having meltdowns, withdrawing, have, defiant behavior when there's a difference in their routine from, location to location. So I'm going to play the first video.
Hello, my name is Mary Gordon from Roots of Empathy, and I'd like to speak with you today about the temperament trait of adaptability. Adaptability means the ease with which a person adjusts to a situation. And that's all of us, and we are living in a world with unprecedented change. So the idea of understanding how our child adapts to new situations can be very helpful to them for their own understanding of why they get upset about some things and what strategies you can help them deliver. If you think about the continuum of adaptability, children who have low adaptability have great challenges with transitioning from one situation to another, and they're very often thrown off guard by a sudden change. If you're on the high end of the continuum of adaptability, it means that you find it interesting when something changes and a new situation is stimulating rather than worrisome. The role of the parent is to take the child we have and to recognize where that child sits on the continuum, but also to recognize where we sit on the continuum. Are we somebody who has a high adaptability level where change is something that is interesting? Or do we prefer things to stay in a regular routine? Do we not want to change where the rocking chair is? Or are we the person who's changing the furniture every week because we find it interesting? So, this whole idea of how we think of our little children in terms of adaptability can help us all get along better. So, for example, if you have a little baby and that baby is really motivated and stimulated when you put novelty in the environment, if you put something new, if you change the baby's routine so that the nap is at a different time, or if you change where the baby sleeps, imagine you go on holiday and the baby is sleeping in a different environment. Some little babies have no trouble with that transition, but other babies who would be lower on the continuum of adaptability might be freaked out by having to sleep in new circumstances, a different kind of lighting. Things smell different, they feel different. And that little baby will need our comfort, our physical and emotional comfort, to help them transition to a new situation. It's not that you would never do anything to prevent change happening. You would just be aware that you would be available to help that child feel comfortable with change. So if you're on the high level of adaptability and you're in a family where your partner is the opposite end, you've got a lot of negotiation to do, but you realize that that's the issue. It's just with our children, having a lens of adaptability can really make things easier for them to help them understand themselves. So when that little baby goes to school and they're very happy in school, and one day their teacher is sick. For children who have low adaptability, this might be a calamity. They might be completely stressed, feeling worried and anxious because they don't know what to expect with this new person and it's a change in the routine. So that they might not sleep well that night, wondering if that perfectly fine substitute teacher is going to be there, or if their favorite teacher that they were comfortable with is going to be there. Our job as parents is to help the child make that transition by talking to them about how they feel, by allowing them to practice how they can talk to themselves. Because if we teach children the ability to self-talk by talking through with them how they're feeling, they will be independent when we're not there to talk themselves through things that are difficult in areas that might change in their life. If you have a child who's high in adaptability and in school, their life might be a little bit challenging because they might get bored with the routine of school and they might crave change because they handle change so well. They might be the ones to push the boundaries and say, well, I want to go on the steep slope. Whereas the child with low adaptability is quite happy managing on the slope that they're good at that moment. So it's important to support our children at every level and to be aware that the high adaptability child can have stresses as well, but we have to reinforce the importance of routine, just to be sensitive about how they are experiencing that routine. Think about your child as an adolescent. It's hard sometimes to think about that when they're younger, but guaranteed they're all going to be adolescents. If you put the lens of adaptability on the experience of the several years where they're transitioning from being a child to an adolescent, that is a huge change. And that's not just physiological changes, that's emotional changes, that's relationship changes. What we do now with our children is really going to help them deal with the challenges of the change, which that train is coming, you can't stop it. So I think we have a wonderful opportunity to help our children with all the transitions of life. If we think of ourselves in the workplace setting, it's very easy to see those of us who might be very high in adaptability that we wouldn't be stressed out if a deadline changed or a project was suddenly completely changed. But we would be aware of those on our team who would be completely thrown by having to change the plan, by having to be able to adapt to a completely different expectation. That is something that follows us from childhood all the way through. It's not immutable. We can change how we respond to things by practicing and getting the support of the family. So birth is not destiny. With this idea of adaptability, our world will be full of change. Your children will have change every day in their lives. We can help them adjust to whatever those changes are.
So some things that I wanted to make a note of from that video is how she talked about how it is a temperament, right? And it's a skill that we can then build upon. So some children are already higher on the spectrum of adaptability, and some are lower on it, and just like adults are, right? And so it's something you and I can reflect on and see where we fall. So I know for myself, I like a lot of change, and um, you know, it excites me in the sense that like change is good. Change, brings can bring positive things, and just switching it up as opposed to having, set routines, you know, ongoing, right? And so to other people, that could possibly really stress them out, and they'd be like lower on the adaptability scale. And I think it's one of those points of it's okay to be on either end, and that's, it's important to note that. And I think it's okay for us to say that for children too, right? Like, we can't expect every child to be highly adaptable, but we do want them to obviously have enough skills and adaptability to thrive, at home and at school, and be able to move through each transition. Because realistically, like I said, the most certain thing is uncertainty, right, in life, because change is inevitable. And we want to teach kids that, those skills of how to transition between each, how to move through each transition, right? Well, because they're inevitable, right? So some ways, oops, let me switch the slide there. Some ways you can help promote adaptability in the classroom is you can provide reflective feedback when the child is showing the adaptability skill. So if a child is showing items that are displaying adaptability, let's say, right away they know the next thing in the routine is to do the next task. Let's say they know that right after that, if the next thing is groups, then before that is cleanup, right, for what they're doing, and they just start cleaning it all up, right, on their own. That shows an adaptability skill, right? And so you could provide reflective feedback. Oh, like, oh wow, I really saw, you jumped to the next thing in our routine. Good job there, right? So it's just pointing out when they are displaying that skill. One way to help promote adaptability is also making the rules and expectations very clear and known. You don't want to have them be sort of unclear, or maybe discussed once or twice and then kind of fell off from there, or maybe they change a little, and it wasn't really that clear. So you don't want to confuse a child with them. You really want to make sure that the rules and expectations are just clear and well known for them to follow. You can also teach them, in quotes here, the second language of school, right? So it's the words you teach students to connect, relate, and function in the classroom. And then you can also use the phrase a lot, which is, at school we, right? And we hear this one a lot. We blank, right? So at school, and then it would be going over like the norms that are different between home and school. So what you're saying with this sentence, at school we, it shows that you're normalizing what they do at home, and that's fine, that's okay, but that's not what we do at school. And we clearly say what we do at school, not just what we don't do, right? We want to focus on what we do, as opposed to don't. Because if we just say at school we don't do this, then a child won't know what they're supposed to be replacing that with. Okay, so here's our second video, and this one is a TED Talk on, his title is No Such Thing as Naughty. And I love this quote that comes from the video, that is, our teaching becomes genuinely therapeutic. And so he talks a lot about kind of therapy skills that I've learned, to use with children in therapy that teachers can 100% do and use in their classroom, and how it can really change, right? Your feelings and approach, and also the children's behavior in the classroom. And so I really want you guys to pay attention to this one, because he has so many key points that I can't even list them all. This is a wonderful one to even rewatch and share with others.
Hello everyone. So my message is that in any classroom where there's challenging behaviour, there is really no such thing as naughty. I want to start my explanation of what I mean with a bit of educational theory. At the heart of all teaching and learning lies the concept of shared meanings. Two people coming together to share one concept, one idea. This is how we learn. We have conversations with other people where we engage and share meanings, and we take new understandings from those dialogues and internalize them into our own monologues. Now, at the start of my career teaching children with emotional and behavioral difficulties, I thought I had this concept down pat, and I thought I could base my teaching on it. Things didn't go well. My classroom was a place of loose emotions, hurled insults, and flying chairs. There was nothing wrong with the concept. It was just that my understanding of it was somewhat shallow. I thought I could prepare my meanings beforehand, walk into the classroom and deliver them like pearls to my pupils who were waiting. But my pupils were busy making meanings of their own. Some were tormented by inner demons. Some were isolated by their angers or their anxieties. And some were just stuck in flight or fight mode. Some were just waiting for the very moment that I was going to let them down and hurt them like every other adult they'd met. There were two things that I failed to understand about those shared meanings in those early days. Firstly, we seek out those connections with other people, not just for the sake of taking on new information, not just for our cognitive needs, but for our emotional needs as well. So we want to connect with people to feel reassurance, love, trust, safety. And the other thing I failed to understand was that shared meanings have to be just that. They have to be shared, created by both people there and then in the moment of the lesson. There has to be some reciprocity. And the only reciprocity that was in my classroom in those early days was that while I was angry with my pupils for not being able to come over and share in my academic meanings, they were equally angry with me for not being able to share in those emotional meanings. So I had to change. I had to become someone who was strong enough and fixed enough to be able to be someone that these pupils could come and refer to and come and communicate to. So I had to learn not to take the insults personally. I had to become someone who could keep from putting their emotions at the forefront of my interactions with my children. I had to become strong and positive and open enough in the face of some dark words and some dark deeds that I bore witness to. And I had to remember that always there is a reason behind the challenging behavior. Abuse, trauma, bereavement, neglect, attachment issues. And I had to remember that although these pupils were creating victims in the people around them, they were always victims in themselves too. And I had to become someone who was never distracted or sidetracked by shallow judgments of these pupils, such as he's naughty, or by myths, or by labels, or by simple statements such as he's so manipulative, he knows exactly what he's doing. Well, he does know what he's doing, but he doesn't know why he's doing it, or how much damage it's creating in him as well as others, or how to stop. Or statements such as, she's just attention seeking, so ignore her. No, she's reaching out, trying to connect in the only way that she knows how. And the only way that most of my pupils knew how was through their behavior. Because behavior is a form of communication. And what they're communicating is their unmet needs. We're pretty good at meeting most of the needs that children bring into the classroom. If they're hungry, we pack them off to breakfast club. If they have a problem with maths, we can break it down for them. If they have problems talking, we've got communication aids. But with emotional needs, things are different. Why? Because children like us don't walk into a room and say, I'm abused, I'm traumatized. They don't have placards saying, I'm anxious or I'm angry. Like us, they can't even identify their emotions sometimes, never mind communicate them. And even if they could do both those things, they would need to find somebody who's there, strong and unafraid and able to take those meanings on. That's not always easy. Because to take those meanings on, those emotional meanings, you have to feel them for yourself. You have to manage them, contain them, and above all, translate them. Translate anger for fear, disengagement for anxiety, defiance for anxiety, manipulative behaviors for anxiety, everything for anxiety. And if you can do that, connect on both the cognitive and emotional level, amazing things happen in your classroom. The learning's transformed because for the first time in their lives, they're in a room with someone who gets them and they can connect with. And their learning potential begins to be fulfilled. You still get behavior problems, but there's no more flying chairs. The behavior problems are smaller, more manageable, and above all, they're opportunities for growth and learning rather than for judgment, such as naughtiness, shame and rejection. You can go from the judgmental, what were you thinking, to the genuine inquiry, what were you thinking? Tell me so I can help you meet your needs better the next time. And your teaching is transformed, not just because you're teaching at a level commensurate with their levels of cognitive and emotional development, by which I mean you're taking into account the effects of trauma that maybe have left them with heightened egocentricity, a lack of sense of consequence, impaired levels of empathy, damaged connection with the world. No, what's most amazing is that your teaching becomes genuinely therapeutic. I used to believe that when I was confronted by a child whose experience of trauma had knocked their ability to connect with the world for six, and that while they could read or write individual words, they couldn't connect with sentences or paragraphs. I used to believe children like that needed therapy before I could begin to teach them and they could begin to learn. But therapists do just what we should be doing as teachers, creating those genuinely reciprocal shared meanings at the level of their cognitive and emotional development. And if we do that as teachers, our teaching becomes genuinely therapeutic. To teach a child to read or write, for example, suddenly becomes teaching them not only to order their thoughts, but their emotions, to teach levels of empathy. If they're writing, with the needs of their readers. If they're reading, to empathize with characters in novels or the peoples that they read about in history or geography books, for example. We all need to be doing this whenever this challenging behavior in the classroom. We need to be creating those shared meanings. There's a great deal of talk about getting mental health support into schools these days. But a connection like that is the best mental health support a damaged child can receive. But we shouldn't be leaving it down to individual teachers and individual classes. We need to think about how we view these children on a societal level. In the past, we used to define them by their very inability to come over to us and engage in our meanings. They were the ones that were maladjusted or retarded. We're kinder in our labels these days, but we still define the problem as being within the child. They're the child with the behavior difficulties. That's unfair. The problem isn't in the child, it's in the transaction between us and the child. If we change, the transaction changes and the problem goes away. Put another way, if a child came into your classroom sobbing because they'd been abused the night before at home, you wouldn't say that the problem is the sobbing, you'd say the problem is the abuse. Just because a child replaces the sobbing with disruptive behavior doesn't change the location of the problem, it's still the abuse. Shared meanings on a cognitive and an emotional level are the way to help these children. And if we prevent them from gaining shared meanings by our use of words like naughty, misbehavior, bad, or mad, we leave these children with only two choices. Either they can go elsewhere for the meanings and the connections that they so badly need and so badly crave. So they go off to gangs of their peers, for example. Or they can sit there and take the judgments that we're handing down to them, the shame that we're giving them, the damage that our message does is internalized into an already badly damaged self-image. We need to make sure that our shared meanings help these children. We need to rethink challenging behavior in the classroom. And the behavior we need to think most of is our behavior to help these children. Thank you very much.
So I definitely encourage you guys to watch that again. I will put up the link to on the Blackboard to this video. But I've watched it a few times, and different points, they stick out to me, each time I watch it. But I think what's nice about it is it's just such a reminder of like the impact you have, in a child's life. And it's not just about building, the skills of reading and writing and math, right? It's also building them to be functioning adults one day in society who, with where there's, mental health needs and emotions just in daily life, right? And so I like how he said, we shouldn't be placing this just on, an individual teacher or a person, right? So like a therapist, this should be on societal level of how we view. And he is right, like it's gotten better, but we definitely have a road to take. But we wouldn't, with that, we still don't want to dismiss the impact you certainly do have as a teacher, or any other role you have within children, right? And it really is that foundation of a relationship you build with them and being on their level, and having this empathic, attuned relationship with them. I know in grad school, I remember the statistic of, you learn a lot of theories, right? And different ways to approach therapy for different problems or different, your belief systems as a therapist, right? And, you kind of choose from there. And it's a lot of pressure, and you put so much, thought and practice into those techniques and tools, right? But what they teach you at the foundation of it all is how to build a therapeutic relationship. And there's a statistic out there, and I don't want to botch it, so I'm not going to say, this amount, because I don't remember, but I want to say it was like 50% of, positive therapeutic outcome of therapy was the building that therapeutic relationship. And so it just goes to show you on how much of an impact that has, and how important it is for you to build that, right, with, the children you work with, and how you view them is how, you treat them. So that's one of my favorites. So gonna just end with this one. Next slide. So it's just my share on my daughter's, Miss Stella. So she, compared to her brothers, her brother's very high on adaptability scale, where he can just, kind of like that attitude of like, where are we going next, right? And just happy as can be, per transition, right? Give or take, right? Obviously, there's, no, there could be times where no, that's not the case. But for the most part, he's, high on the adaptability scale. Whereas Stella, she's really had to work on this skill, and, use her adults in her life, right, as resources to grow this, because her temperament naturally is she struggles with transitions. And so that's something as a parent I've had to learn, and other adults in her life have had to learn, and then help her grow this adaptability skill. So how it looked like for her personally was, she would struggle with transitions where she would become very dysregulated, completely. And this could be a transition of school just started or school just ended. Maybe there's a break, like a winter break. So it's times like where you think like, oh, this is going to be so much fun, right? But there's just complete emotional dysregulation where you just, even if, you're trying to do something fun, it's overshadowed by a lot of big feelings. Which can be very, draining also, right, for the adults. And so I would say once, when she started first grade, she was having a really hard time with this girl in her class who wasn't being the most kind to her for maybe 2 months. And it wasn't being worked on, right then and there, right in the classroom. And so a lot of times she'd come home completely dysregulated. And so it wasn't just a transition that would completely dysregulate, but also when things unexpectedly would happen, right, that weren't really in her plans to deal with. And so, what the tools that we helped her grow in the adaptability skill was helping her. We started to learn, right, like what it looked like. So when, you can kind of tell, right, the second she'd get in the car, something's gonna happen that day. And so what we would do is help her identify, like, hey, like, you're looking sad, like, or, hey, I'm noticing you're getting upset on, a lot right now. What's going on? When I just said, I don't know, something, little, right, that usually wouldn't warrant that type of reaction, right? And just helping her identify with her behavior is happening right then, for her to then look within and self-reflect, right? So I taught her to, self-reflect on what she was feeling and thinking. And then she would, share kind of her feelings and what happened at school that day. And she'd cry and, heartbreaking. And we would, validate, right, her feelings, and then normalize. Yeah, that does, sound very hurtful. I would imagine, you would feel really sad after that, or confused, right? Why you weren't welcomed, right, to play in that game with those girls. That isn't fair. You're right, right? And so just helping her, feel better, right, emotionally and regulated, and teaching her how it's okay to be sad. And but also while teaching her, like, we wouldn't want those bad moments of the day to create whole bad days, right? And so we would work with her on being able to transition out of that as well, right? So it didn't have to dictate the rest of her day. And so we would assist her in, kind of picking an activity that would help her feel better, and, in a coping skill, and, and just kind of be softer, give her, some extra love that day. But it really helped her grow her adaptability skill. And I would say, like, just this year, She's now 7. It's really helped, but I would say before that it was, incredibly challenging, between transitions for a very long time, and very draining, for the adults as well around her. But this skill has been able to grow, and she's gone really a lot better with the transitions, which is wonderful. But definitely a skill, and it's also definitely a temperament, right, that you have to build upon. So that was just my share on observations I've seen that you could possibly take back and, reflect on observations you've seen with children, and then also, what I've done to help grow the adaptability skill, and things you could potentially utilize as well. And then that's it for today's lecture. So thank you, everyone, for listening. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.